So all three of my degrees are in sociology. I have always cared very deeply about, how could we make the world a better place? And so if you know anything about sociology, you know that we study inequalities. So we are the field that looks at inequalities of race, class, and gender, that looks at how different kinds of social policies either do or don't help with people who are disadvantaged often. That's basically what I spent my life doing, and that's what I cared about. So in sociology classes, we can teach you how to do research methods. We can teach you, kind of the history of the question of why is it that we tend to have what's called social reproduction, where people who are born into poverty are more likely to be in poverty as adults compared to those born in the middle class. So all of those kinds of skills in that discipline, right? What happened is I'm going along my way. I'm a professional sociologist, and I inherit something called the social justice scholars, which was fascinating. Right? After a while, or I'd say fairly early on, it occurs to me, so the requirements of this are that the students do 20 hours of service a semester, and, they take this social problems course. And I'm thinking, we never ask these students, what is justice? We never read anything about justice. In fact, as a sociologist, I've never been asked to read any philosophy on justice, the various kinds of justice, right? And I thought this is a very strange enterprise. How do we have something called the social justice scholars based in sociology and no one ever reads any text about justice? I became very dissatisfied. And I started reading more philosophical text and thinking about different ways of how do we respond to that question. And I became more and more dissatisfied and more curious and started to think about, this is interesting. But sociologists, we go back usually to about the 19th century, and that's it. If you're in political science, at least political theory will go back to the ancients, right? Sociology doesn't have that. And so I started asking more questions. And it occurred to me that what drives me and what drives many sociologists is this deep-seated caring about justice and fairness and the good society. But we're not prepared to ask those questions. And so for me, this is where a very good foundational liberal arts education would have come in handy, where it wasn't tied to a discipline, but it's a habit of mind, and it's also a furnishing of the mind with what has that conversation been for the last few millennia. And so as I started reading and thinking, more reading Socratic dialogues, reading the Republic, I thought, this is why I actually got into sociology, is to ask and think about these questions. And what actually really does happen is many people in my discipline have, they have kind of inchoate, unspoken ideas about what is justice, what is a good society, what is a good life, but it's not really ever made explicit. And I think it's very important for us to have this kind of ongoing conversation that informs whatever kind of professional work we're doing. And so for me, I think that's how it became real in my life, the difference between a liberal arts approach and a professionalized discipline. And there's nothing wrong with that professionalized discipline. I think it's also very important. I like the scholarly work that I do in my discipline, but it's been very much informed now by this more kind of liberal arts asking these deep questions.